Hello and welcome back to the Audio Elgin podcast. This is your host, Abigail Fritz, and today I'll be speaking with Amy Miller about the role that a downtown can play in building community. Could you start by telling me a little about your background and what brought you to Elgin?
So when I moved to Elgin, I lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and I worked for the city of Fort Worth. I was in a program in the mayor's office that focused on defense downsizing. And so I spent a lot of time working in small business development and trying to, and on their part, in Elgin, we were trying to find new uses and new life for our historic buildings. Fort Worth was trying to find new opportunities for their engineers, because Bell Helicopter and the other major defense employers were laying people off. And they wanted to keep that brain capital in the community. Before I lived in Fort Worth, I originally was born in West Allis, Wisconsin in February of 1971. And we lived in Wisconsin for about 8 years, and then Ohio, and then we moved to Texas when I was 12.
What did your parents do?
They were in journalism. My dad was a journalist, and we moved to Texas because he was following newspaper jobs. And we were working with the newspaper industry. And ultimately, my mom became a full-time bookkeeper and accounting.
So I know that you played a part in getting Sip, Shop, and Stroll started. Could you tell me about that event?
Absolutely. So 5 years ago, we had a much smaller level of occupancy in the downtown district, much smaller number of retail businesses than we do today in 2019. But 5 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce president, Gina Carter, and I went to the State Downtown Association conference. And one of the programs that we attended was Ladies' Night Out, is what this community called it. We got the idea at the state conference. We definitely adapted it and grew it for our community. When we came back to Elgin, we talked to the core downtown businesses that were open about, how do you feel about this? If you were to have extended shopping hours one night a month, and we did this promotion inviting people to come downtown, and we treated it kind of like a little mini party, like an open house. And maybe some of the businesses can help host with live music. Folks would be able to offer wine or beer tastings. Is that something that you would participate in and help make happen? And we got a really good response and launched it with 10 businesses, one of which was a food truck. Katie's Thai food truck was one of our original participants, and the Lions Club and their thrift store, the Owl, the wine bar and home goods store was open, Dorothy's Jewelry. There were several folks in that original mix that are long-standing businesses in the downtown district, and they're still involved today. It grew as the downtown district grew. And today, in 2019, it really is a pretty significant monthly event. We usually have somewhere between 20 and 27 businesses participating. We have lots of nonprofit groups come in and partner with businesses and set up out front where they are either selling product to raise money for their cause, or maybe they're just passing out information. But we have a really nice nonprofit engagement. We have businesses from other parts of the community who also come downtown and partner with being in front of a business or being able to set up in the downtown area so that they can benefit the crowds that come. There's always live music. There's always lots of great food and drink to sample and taste. And one of the new things that started last year was a component called the Battle of Main Street. And that is a really fun kind of little competition between Rainy Real Estate and Cannon Insurance. And those two businesses moved into downtown, but the owners all happened to have gone to high school together. And so they struck up this little informal competition that got pretty serious and pretty funny pretty quick. And so most months, they don't do it every month, but most months they pick something to battle about. And so this month it's school supplies. We're raising donated school supplies to support the Elgin and McDade school districts. And their competition is which of their offices can raise the most supplies. And other months it might be a nonprofit like Down Home Ranch. And they served chili one month. And it was to see who has the best chili and can raise the most money to support the nonprofit group. They have really brought a lot of fun, energy, and vitality to the overall event. They do a lot of social media posting back and forth with each other the week leading into Sip, Shop, and Stroll. So that generates kind of some fun excitement about what's going on and gets, brings a whole nother component of people into the district that might not otherwise have a reason to come.
Could you tell me about some of the building restorations that you've worked on?
When I first came to Elgin in 1996, I worked with the Elgin Historical Association in renovating the Depot Museum, formerly referred to as the Union Depot, which is the original train depot that was the passenger depot. And that was a lot of fun to work with them, and was also a really hard project. It was one that was very expensive, and the Historic Association had applied for a grant through the Department of Transportation. And the city and the Historic Association actually worked for multiple years bidding out the project before they were able to financially get it done, because the work ended up being much more expensive than what was originally budgeted and what the grant would cover. And that's not necessarily unusual in historic preservation. Sometimes projects end up costing more than is anticipated.
Why is the cost of restoration so hard to predict?
Usually, in my experience, it has to do with foundation work, or a lot of times it is the question of getting into it. There's only so much that you can know about what you're going to deal with until you start tearing out modifications that have been made.
Yeah.
And then maybe you find bigger problems or concerns that you couldn't know about until you got that far.
Why is it important that we restore these historic buildings despite the cost of doing so?
So Texas has a Main Street program, and Elgin is one of 90 Texas Main Street cities. When I came here in 1996 to be their Main Street manager and economic development director, that program was in place. Elgin was participating. It looks at historic preservation in the context of economic development, and it helps property owners see how a building can be renovated and have a new use. Acknowledges that properties are typically not going to continue in the same use that they were historically. And so you take this existing infrastructure, all the energy that's associated with the brick of the buildings, the utilities that are already in place in your downtown, all that infrastructure gets brought back to life again and is able to generate jobs, property values, sales tax, investment for the community, a place to gather, a place to identify with, and serve the community again, rather than being lost or being replaced.
So what you're saying about restoring old buildings but giving them a new function, that sounds like it applies really well to the Knopfsinger House, which is now City Hall. Can you tell me about that project and the history of that building?
Yes. So the Knopfsinger House is Dr. I.B. Knopfsinger and his wife, Mrs. Knopfsinger. They designed the house. She was did the plans for it. She was also a pharmacist, and they had moved here from Kentucky. And the building is this beautiful 2-story Queen Anne Victorian style home. And one of the other things about Elgin is that we have some really grand, beautiful homes, but we have a very small number of, compared to other communities. We simply do not have block upon block upon block of, all these grand historic homes. So I feel like the ones that we have are even more important and need to be treasured and cared for even more, because it's a reflection on our part. Our community has really always been a working class community, and the homes in our community are very much working people homes. And so we do have fewer of these really grand ones. I would love to see our community see more value in those working class homes as well, and trying to help people understand the importance of preserving those and keeping those renovated. But to circle back to the Knopfsinger House, it does function as City Hall, and it has some really fantastic original architectural elements. On its part, I think it only had 4 owners. It briefly served as a bank. It was a bank for a chunk of time in the community after the Knopfsinger family sold it. But then the city purchased it when the bank failed in the savings and loan crisis. And so it did not have the same level of drastic modifications made to it that the Union Depot did.
You've talked about restoring historic buildings and events like Sip, Shop, and Stroll in the context of building community. What role do you think that preserving history has in trying to achieve that goal?
Preserving the history in a community is critically important to its identity, and I believe to its long-term sustainability. When you're a community like Elgin that has such a depth of history, both from its cultural and its ethnic background, its industrial background, and all these amazing historic buildings, there's just a lot of stories to tell and a lot of things that help us perhaps understand better why this community has evolved the way it has, why it's a very resilient community. It's one that is very focused on building on its past and not kind of turning its back or walking away, but seeing how its history is an asset that can help it be successful. The downtown district is overall, as a good example of that, it's not unusual when companies are looking for a relocation site for them across the nation to look at the downtown district of the communities that they're in. And that is often the deciding factor of, we want to locate here. This is a community that is moving forward.
Yeah.
It's a community, the downtown reflects that kind of overall lifeline and blood pressure of the community as a whole. And so on our part, we've had companies, many companies and lots of individuals say that the downtown district was a positive part of them deciding to relocate or to move here. Now that we have a much more renovated and occupied district, our challenge becomes continuing to keep that occupancy high and continuing to develop and grow the businesses that are here. So on our part, we're going to be continuing to do things that'll help support that business growth, but also be working on recruiting businesses to occupy space. The events are definitely a key part of the involvement of the community and the engagement of the community. We are working with the Historic Association, the Mary Christian Burleson Foundation, the Bastrop County Historical Society, the Main Street Program, and the Historic Review Board to develop a historic preservation strategic plan. And I believe that that's going to give us some really good guidance as to what kind of is coming next for historic preservation. But again, in that economic development, tourism, community placemaking viewpoint.
So I think my last question for you today is, do you have a favorite building in downtown?
Oh, I don't know that I could pick a favorite for downtown.
It can be as arbitrary as this one looks pretty.
Right. Actually, I would probably steer more towards architectural elements. So let's see, at the north end of Main Street, there's a building, the Owen Bogart Law Offices. That property has original prism glass in its transom windows. And that was very carefully preserved by the owner, Mark Owen, in the last year. He was doing some renovation work. And prism glass is a very unique type of glass that was marketed when it was used in the early 1900s as a product that you wanted to use because it would throw more light deeper into your building. And it really does. It's really a pretty amazing product. But that kind of thing, there are stained glass windows at the intersection of First and Main in the Farmers and Merchants Bank building. You have the Prosperity Bank building, which is the original Elgin National Bank building that was built by Howard Coons. And he, according to the research I've read, it was a fairly famous architect in Austin doing a lot of estate properties there. But yeah, on our part, I think it is all the brick detailing in general in downtown Elgin is very special to our community. And that, of course, is because of the craftsmen that we had here, because of the brick that we were making. On my part, my family is a journalism family, and the newspaper that my parents owned in Wisconsin, the Eagle Review, that I remember from when I was little helping with, I think that kind of initial beginning of the value of a small community and the engagement that that community can have with its local paper, with its local organizations, with its downtown district. That probably started there and kind of carried on after we moved to Texas.
That was Amy Miller speaking about her involvement with Elgin's downtown. As she said, events like Sip, Shop, and Stroll are a great chance to enjoy some sales, samples, and live music while seeing everything that Elgin has to offer. It takes place from 5 to 8 on the second Thursday of every month, and this month's event just happens to be tomorrow. The Elgin Depot Museum will be open during this time, so come join us for a tour of our exhibit hall, or stop by for an interview that could make you the star of your very own episode. As always, I thank you for your likes, comments, and subscribes, and I will see you next week for another episode of Audio Elgin.